What's up, you guys, and welcome back to the podcast. Today's episode is something I've been super excited to record. I've genuinely wanted to record this for quite a while because I think it's the foundation of almost everything that we talk about on this show, and that is what it means to eat for your metabolism. Because even as someone who's been in the health and fitness space for 8+ years now, and I've been coaching for 6 of those 8, I didn't always understand this, at all. When I first got into health and fitness, I had the typical understanding of metabolism, which is just that it's this fancy word that people throw around. Some people have a fast metabolism, some people have a slow one, and you kind of just assume that you're stuck with whatever you got. Whatever your genetics gave you, that's what your metabolism is. And it wasn't something that I thought that you could actually influence or change until I got deeper into fitness and the bodybuilding space. And my understanding of metabolism started to shift a little bit. I started to see metabolism as the mathematical equation of calories in versus calories out, where your metabolism is how many calories your body burns in a day. And if you wanted to change your body, you just need to manipulate that number. You need to eat less, move more. And I even started to understand a little bit around the power of reverse dieting and what that could do. Except it wasn't always that simple either, because at some point in my journey, I was doing all of that and my body wasn't responding anymore in the way that I expected it to. And I kept thinking that I was the problem, that I just needed to be more disciplined, be more consistent, cut a little more. And it wasn't until I started going deeper into functional health, into my own labs, into even experience working with clients who were also doing everything right and still not seeing results, that I realized that metabolism is so much more, that it's not a mathematical equation. It's not just how many calories your body burns in a day, but it's more importantly, how your body functions at a cellular level. And it is deeply, deeply connected to your hormones, to your gut, to your liver, to your nervous system, to your adrenals, to all of it. And it's not just connected to those systems, but it's how all these systems are connected to one another and how they're all connected back to your physique and your appearance. And so that's what today's podcast episode is really about. I want to walk you through what a pro-metabolic approach to nutrition actually looks like and why it produces completely different results in your physique than just the traditional dieting approach. Because there is a very big difference between losing weight and leaning out. And I want you to understand that and listen to this episode through that lens. They sound like the same thing, but they are not. When most people decide that they're going to change their body, you go into diet mode, cutting calories, cutting carbs, adding some cardio, trying to be good during the week. And sometimes the scale goes down, it feels like it's working. But when you lose weight through traditional dieting approaches of restriction, you're not just losing fat, you're also losing muscle, you're losing water weight, and most importantly, you're sending your body into a stress state. You are telling your metabolism that resources are scarce and it needs to go into conservation mode, and that it needs to slow your metabolism down. And so your body is really smart. It listens to that. It does that. And so you may end up in a smaller body with a lower number on the scale, but you're also probably a little bit softer in your physique, less defined, with a slower metabolism than when you started, less muscle tissue than when you started, and a body that's even more resistant to change than it was before. So the second you go back to eating normally, you're not in diet mode anymore, you go back to eating normally, all the weight comes back, plus some. And this is a cycle that so many women get stuck in. The cycle may sound all too familiar to you, and I know that because I've worked with so many women in your shoes, stuck losing and getting the same 10 to 20 pounds year after year after year. That is taking the approach of just trying to lose weight. When you take the approach of trying to lean out, it is a completely different process, because it forces you to take a metabolism-first approach towards body transformation. And what you're actually doing there is you're supporting your body's ability to do what it naturally wants to do. Your body naturally wants to burn fat, build and preserve muscle, regulate hormones, function efficiently. You're not forcing it into this strict deficit, just hoping for the best. You are creating internal conditions inside of your body for body recomposition to happen. Body recomposition is much different than just weight loss. It means body fat is going down and your muscle stays or even increases in some circumstances. Your energy improves, your hormones stabilize, and the results actually last because you haven't tanked your metabolism to get there. So you can go back to eating quote unquote normally without rebounding and getting all the weight back. And so the difference in your results, not just in the short term, but also in the long term, are dramatically different when you start to take a different approach. not just eating to lose weight, but eating to support your metabolism. And that's what we're going to be breaking down exactly how to do today. So what does it mean to eat for your metabolism? I'm going to break this down into 4 core pillars because each one is going to target a different specific hormonal system. And when you understand the why behind each one of these pillars of pro-metabolic eating, it stops to feel like this set of rules, and it starts to feel like something that you genuinely feel empowered and want to do because you understand how it's supporting your body from the inside out. So with that being said, pillar number 1 is the one that we talk about all of the time on the podcast, and that is energy availability. And this is critical for your thyroid function. So we're specifically talking a little bit about cortisol, but mostly around thyroid in this section. Your metabolism needs enough fuel to function. And this sounds pretty obvious, but truthfully, most of the women that I work with are chronically under eating, not necessarily because you're trying to starve yourself, but because you've been trained to just eat less by diet culture. You've been trained to see eating less as quote unquote better or more disciplined, or maybe you're just eating clean and healthy, lots of protein, lots of veggies, but not much else. And what feels like a healthy diet is actually not enough calories to support the demands that you're placing on your body every single day. And your body is wired for survival above everything else. So when it senses that the energy that's coming in is consistently less than the energy that is going out, it does something really intelligent. It adapts. It downregulates your metabolism, trying to find ways to burn less, to conserve energy so it's not in a chronic deficit all the time, because that is a huge threat to your survival. So your metabolic rate drops, your thyroid output slows down, your body temperature decreases, your digestion becomes a little bit more sluggish, your non-essential functions, reproduction, hair growth, libido, immune response, they begin to become deprioritized because your body is in this conservation mode. It's in this adapted state. And it's doing exactly what it's designed to do when it perceives scarcity. It's protecting you, even though it's also sabotaging the goals that you have when it comes to your physique. This is the reason, number 1 reason, so many women feel like they're doing everything right and getting nowhere. So think about what this actually looks like in practice. You start eating less. Maybe you're eating 1,400 calories. Maybe it's 1,200 calories. And at first, it works. You lose weight at first, but then it stalls. So you have to eat even less. Maybe you have to add in extra cardio. You lose a little bit more in doing that, but then it stalls again. So then you have to cut a little bit more, add a little bit more cardio. And each and every time your body is adapting more and more and more to this low intake until you get to a point where you're barely eating, you're training consistently, you're working, you're living at the gym, and the scale will not move. You're exhausted, you're puffy, you're cold all the time, your period is irregular or gone, and you genuinely can't figure out what you're doing wrong. You're not doing anything wrong. You've just been under eating for so long that your metabolism has adapted down to match your intake. And now losing fat from that state is almost physiologically impossible because your body is holding on to every single calorie that it gets. And connecting this back to your hormones, your thyroid is at the center of this. Your thyroid is the controller of your metabolism. Think of your thyroid as the on-off switch for your cells. When thyroid hormones are functioning efficiently, your cells are turned on. They are active, they are producing energy, they are doing their jobs, they are burning calories, they are telling your cells to perform the function that they're designed to naturally, optimally. But when your thyroid function is suppressed because your body is in a state of energy scarcity, then your cells shift into low power mode, where they're not functioning optimally. And the downstream consequences of that is that every single cell in your body, and your cells are what powerhouse every system, every organ, everything. When your cells and the function of your cells become inefficient, that's going to be impacted on your energy levels, on your digestion, on your body temperature, on your mood, on your physique, because your body becomes extremely efficient at conserving energy, which is another way of saying it becomes incredibly resistant to fat loss and very symptomatic across the board. Everything feels like it's just not functioning as well as it could or should. So, with all this being said, the first pillar of eating pro-metabolically is simply you have to eat enough, not in a deficit. And for a lot of the women listening to this, enough is significantly more than what you're currently eating. Now, I can already hear you're probably asking yourself the question, okay, Gab, but like, how do I know if I'm actually eating enough? How do I know if I'm under eating? And then underneath of that, it's like, okay, but I want to lose weight, not gain it. And so how do I where do I go from here? And I get it. I have been there. I talk to women in your exact shoes every single day. So let me walk you through exactly what this process looks like inside of my coaching. This is called a reverse diet. It is the foundation of where I start with clients across the board before we ever even touch a fat loss phase. Step one of this reverse dieting process is to figure out where you actually are. Do a dietary recall for an entire week. Log everything that you eat honestly. Don't try to change anything. Don't try to eat healthier or eat less or eat more. Just eat how you have been eating. And from there, you're going to get your average calorie intake. This is just data. This number is going to tell us where your current maintenance metabolic rate is, assuming that you've been maintaining your weight here, stuck in a plateau. The general rule of thumb is if your average is below 1900 calories, then you are under eating and your metabolism is not in a place where fat loss is going to really work for you in the way that you want it to. And the reason for this is because it's very difficult to create a deficit from 1900 calories for the long run, depending on who you are, obviously, depending on your lifestyle, your current activity levels, your hormonal status, those kinds of things. This is just a general rule of thumb that I want you to understand. Your body is already in a conservation mode and cutting is not the answer. You're going to plateau super quickly or put yourself deeper into a hole when it comes to hormones and metabolic health. So step 3 is to start adding from wherever you are, from that average intake that you calculated. You're going to start adding from there slowly, around 50 to 100 calories every 2 or 3 weeks, primarily through carbohydrates. You're not going to just jump straight to your maintenance overnight. You're going to gradually signal to your body that food is more available, that it is safe to upregulate your metabolism, and that it doesn't need to hold on to body fat so tightly. This is where I work with clients every single day, because doing this without gaining significant weight requires a very slow, strategic strategy and support. And so if you want help navigating this reverse dieting process to set you up for a successful fat loss phase, please reach out to me. Step 4 from this is once you do reach your real maintenance, you want to hang out here for ideally 8 to 12 weeks. Let your metabolism stabilize. Let your hormones regulate. Let your body actually trust this new intake before you ask it to go into a deficit again. This can also be considered like a body recomp phase. Then step 5, and only then do we move into fat loss. From a metabolism that is healthy, that is responsive, that is actually capable of changing. And the difference in how your body responds to this compared to cutting from a depleted state is astronomical. It is dramatic. And it is so much healthier for you physically, mentally, emotionally. This is the work that no one wants to do because it's completely counterintuitive to everything that you have been taught or think or know or believe around body transformation, eating more to lose fat, resting more to get leaner, trusting the process before you see results. But it really is the only approach that creates lasting change because it works with your metabolism instead of against it. So that is pillar number 1. Pillar number 2 is meal timing. And the hormones that we're talking specifically about here are cortisol, again, a little bit, and insulin specifically. So this second pillar is around when you eat. And it's one that honestly I skipped over for too long. I lived this wrong for years and I really had no idea the damage that I was doing. When I first started my health journey, I skipped breakfast on purpose. I was like the intermittent faster. I saved all my calories for the end of the day because that's just kind of what makes sense to someone who was really deep into the calories in versus calories philosophy around body transformation. And honestly, I wasn't even that hungry in the morning. Now I know that it's because my blood sugar was a disaster and I was running on cortisol 24/7. And then I started to learn the importance of breakfast, obviously, and I evolved out of that. But then lunch became the meal that I started skipping. And I see this honestly more frequently with clients these days is skipping lunch because you're too busy, you're in a flow, you are running off of cortisol throughout the day, so you're not hungry, you're too busy, or maybe you're just like grabbing something really quick on the go. And then by 3 o'clock, like your energy just falls off a cliff, your cravings hit hard. And what I wish I knew then, what's actually happening when you're skipping meals, when you're going way too long without eating, is your blood sugar is crashing. Your blood sugar drops. And because your body's number one job is to keep you alive, it responds by releasing cortisol to raise your blood sugar back up. One of cortisol's main job is to keep your blood sugar steady. And so it triggers your liver to release glucose into your bloodstream so that your brain and your body have the glucose that it needs, has the energy and fuel that it needs. This is a survival mechanism and it works, but it also comes at a high cost because cortisol is your body's stress hormone. And every time that your body has to use it to compensate for a missed meal or an extended gap between eating, you are triggering a stress response. And this stress response is connected to everything else. Chronically elevated cortisol is going to suppress other hormones like progesterone. It's going to disrupt your cycle. It's going to drive fat storage, particularly in the midsection region. It's going to impair your thyroid function and really just keep your body locked in this chronic low-grade survival mode state that we kind of even talked about in pillar number 1 that undereating does. It creates food noise. It creates anxiety. It creates those afternoon crashes and uncontrolled cravings that feel like a willpower problem when really it's just your body and your blood sugar screaming for stability, screaming for nutrition. And when I learned the direct connection between blood sugar and cortisol, everything really started to click for me. I wasn't necessarily in survival mode because I was stressed at work or not meditating enough. I was in survival mode because I was skipping meals and my body was having to compensate with that by spiking my cortisol to keep my blood sugar stable. The other thing that happens, the more often that you are spiking your blood sugar or going through these blood sugar like peaks and valleys, is insulin comes into the picture. And when your insulin is a storage hormone, its main job is to take glucose and shuttle it into your cells to be used for energy. But when your cells do not need that energy because you're not actually in fight or flight mode, you're not actually needing that energy cellularly, it's going to then take that glucose and store it in fat cells instead of cells that are actually using that energy and burning those calories. So again, it just paints this picture of increasing fat storage because insulin is a storage hormone. So for this, you really just want to make sure it's really not all that complicated, but it is really a non-negotiable. You need to make sure that you're eating within an hour of waking because this is when your cortisol elevates. And because you've been fasting for so long, we need to give your body the fuel that it needs to keep your blood sugar steady without having to elicit a cortisol response for that. So this morning eating and why breakfast is so important is it supports your natural cortisol peak, telling your body that food is available. And then from there, you want to space your meals out every 3 to 4 hours so that your blood sugar stays stable throughout the day and cortisol never has to step in as the backup fuel source so that your blood sugar isn't dipping, crashing, and then spiking back up, causing that insulin resistance as well. So this is not necessarily about eating in a rigid schedule for the rest of your life, but it really is just about understanding that every time you skip a meal or every time you push eating off for hours, that is not discipline, that is not a strength, that is not something to celebrate. Your hormones, your cycle, your energy, your body composition are all paying the price for that, believe it or not. So that's pillar number 2. Pillar number 3, we're going to get deep here. We're going to get sciencey here, so hang with me. Pillar number 3 is talking more so about food quality. We're talking about micronutrients necessary for supporting your metabolism. We're going to talk a little bit about how food quality is important for your gut health, your inflammation, your liver function. And before I get into the specifics here, I want to frame this section very intentionally because the way that you approach food quality makes all the difference around whether this actually works for you long term. This is not, I repeat, this is not a list of foods to fear or to avoid or to take away or to eliminate. I'm not going to tell you to cut out food groups or white knuckle your way through a restrictive protocol. What I want to talk about is what to add. Because when you start crowding your plate and your diet with foods that actually support your body's systems, the things that don't serve you naturally start to take up less space. They naturally start to fall off. And that shift in mindset from like elimination or restriction to addition is one of the biggest differences that I see between women who transform your health and women who stay stuck in the restrict rebound cycle over and over and over. So with that said, this is a little bit about what your metabolism actually needs on a cellular level. We're talking about micronutrients here. Most people think about foods in terms of macros, protein, carbs, fats, and we're going to talk about those in the next section. But underneath of the macros, underneath of all that, your metabolism runs on micronutrients. It runs on vitamins and minerals. They are cofactors for virtually every enzymatic reaction inside of your body. And without them, your cells cannot produce energy efficiently. Your hormones cannot be synthesized properly. Your metabolic machinery, for lack of a better word, it starts to break down. It starts to be on low power mode because it doesn't have the building blocks that it needs to run efficiently. Even if your macros look perfect on paper. This is a piece that I was missing for so incredibly long on my journey. So I want to walk you through some of the most important ones for some of these hormonal systems that we have talked about. So for your adrenals, which your adrenals are what produce cortisol, your adrenals run on vitamin C. Vitamin C is what's used to produce cortisol. So when you are chronically stressed, which most of my clients that come to me are, you are burning through vitamin C at an accelerated rate. And so if you're not replenishing that, your adrenal function is going to start to suffer. So your ability to feel resilient to stress is going to start to suffer. So with that, you want to load up on things like bell peppers, kiwis, citrus fruits, strawberries, leafy greens. Vitamin C is a key micronutrient to make sure that you're incorporating within your diet on a daily basis. Magnesium, another big one for adrenal health. It's involved in over 300 enzymatic reactions inside the body, and it directly supports your nervous system. So it helps to regulate your cortisol output. Most women are chronically deficient in magnesium because chronic stress depletes it rapidly, and our soil is increasingly depleting of it as well. So think things like dark leafy greens, pumpkin seeds, dark chocolate, avocado, all are great magnesium sources. And then the last micronutrient to support your adrenals are going to be B vitamins, specifically B5. Essential for adrenal hormone production. So think things like eggs, avocado, sweet potatoes, sunflower seeds. These are different ways that if you are a stress cadet, if you are go, if you have experienced burnout at any point in your journey, these are going to be key micronutrients for you to focus on incorporating within your nutrition. Now for your thyroid, we've talked a little bit about the importance of thyroid. This is probably one of the most common metabolic conditions that I see with clients across the board is sluggish thyroid function. And your thyroid needs some key micronutrients that we can supplement within your diet to support thyroid hormone function. So it needs selenium specifically to convert T4, which is the inactive thyroid hormone, to T3, which is the active form of thyroid hormone. Without adequate selenium, you could have normal TSH, you could have normal T4, and still have a sluggish thyroid because the conversion isn't happening efficiently. Brazil nuts are going to be your best friend here. They are the most concentrated form of selenium through food. Literally 2 a day is going to cover your needs. And you can also get selenium through things like sardines, eggs, turkey, things like that. Iodine is another important micronutrient here, critical for thyroid function. It's literally a structural component of your thyroid hormone. So you can't make a thyroid hormone without having iodine. Things like seaweed, cod, eggs, dairy are going to be the best sources here. And then lastly is zinc is a very important micronutrient. This is also really crucial for a lot of the women who come to me who are struggling with their cycle because zinc is crucial for progesterone production. It supports thyroid hormone production and it plays a key role in that thyroid hormone conversion that we talked about. So things like pumpkin seeds, beef, oysters, chickpeas, all good sources of zinc. Now, moving on from your hormones, micronutrients are also, or food quality rather, is also going to be a really important thing to focus on to support your gut. And by your gut, I don't just mean digestion. I mean your gut as a full, metabolic organ. So many things happen in your gut beyond just digesting your food. Your gut lining specifically is your body's primary barrier between the outside world and your internal environment, right? So when your gut lining is healthy and it's intact, it is going to be very selective around what it absorbs and what it keeps out. So it's going to absorb in the nutrients from your food and it's going to keep out harmful particles or toxins. When it's compromised from stress, from a poor diet, from antibiotics, medications, chronic inflammation, that barrier is going to start to break down. And therefore, partially digested food particles are going to make their way into your bloodstream, bacteria, toxins, all of which are going to elicit an immune response, creating inflammation in your body. And that inflammation is going to create a long cascade of metabolic dysfunction, insulin resistance, disrupted hunger and fullness hormones, impaired thyroid signaling, and so much more. So your gut lining is crucial for overall metabolic health. Your gut bacteria, the balance of the good bacteria and bad bacteria, I don't even like to use bad bacteria, but more like pathogenic bacteria inside of your gut is going to influence how you metabolize your food and how you store fat even. Certain bacterial imbalances are associated with increased caloric extraction from your food, higher fat storage, stronger cravings for sugary processed foods. So truthfully, two women can eat the same exact diet and have completely different metabolic responses based off of just simply the health of your microbiome. And your gut is also where a lot of hormones like estrogen and even cortisol are metabolized and cleared. So if your gut motility is slow, meaning you're like constipated, you're not going to the bathroom every day, or your microbiome is imbalanced, estrogen or other excess hormones that should be excreted then get reabsorbed back into the body, driving hormone imbalances like estrogen dominance, worsening PMS symptoms, disrupting your cycle, creating an hormonal environment where fat loss is just feeling like a constant uphill battle, regardless of how clean your diet is. So to support your gut, food quality is crucial here. We want to make sure that we're getting in plenty of fiber from prebiotic fiber, specifically from things like garlic, onions, leeks, asparagus, green bananas to feed good gut bacteria, adding fermented foods, which is going to be probiotics, not prebiotics, but probiotics, sauerkraut, kimchi, kefir, creating that microbial diversity that we want, and even things like L-glutamine rich foods that are going to help with the integrity of your gut lining, things like bone broth, grass-fed beef, eggs, cabbage. Those are all really helpful foods and gut supporting foods. Now, we talked a little bit on this already, but there's a huge connection between inflammation and your metabolic health as well. So a chronic low-grade inflammatory state is one of the most unrecognized drivers of metabolic dysfunction that I see with clients. The thing about inflammation is it's similar to stress in the sense that acute inflammation is actually healthy. It's your body's repair mechanism. The problem is when that inflammation becomes chronic, when your body is at this constant low-level inflammatory state because of diet, stress, environmental toxins, gut dysfunction, all of the above. Chronic inflammation causes things like insulin resistance, meaning that your cells are no longer responding to that insulin signal to uptake glucose. So your blood sugar stays elevated, your pancreas then pumps out more insulin, your body shifts into that fat storage mode that we talked about earlier. It also disrupts leptin signaling. Leptin is a hormone that tells your brain that you're full and your metabolism to stay revved up. When leptin resistance develops from chronic inflammation, your brain essentially stops receiving that signal of fullness. So you feel hungrier than you should, your metabolism starts to slow down a bit, and fat loss becomes physiologically harder, not because you don't have willpower, but because your body is just in this inflammatory state and sending poor signals to your brain. Inflammation is also a constant burden to your adrenals. Because cortisol is actually an anti-inflammatory hormone, your body is going to keep producing cortisol to try to manage the inflammation in your body. And this feeds directly back to the cortisol dysregulation that we talked about earlier in pillar 2, that the more that you're pumping out cortisol, the more that your body is in this like conservation survival mode state, slowing down other hormonal processes and causing fat storage, specifically in the midsection region. So supporting your inflammation in your body through nutrition is a non-negotiable here. You want to focus on things like omega-3 rich foods like wild salmon, sardines, walnuts, flax seeds. You want to use extra virgin olive oil as your primary cooking fat, like cooking oil. Incorporate things like turmeric and ginger regularly. I just posted on my story this week, anti-inflammatory tea I was drinking. Just simple, ginger and turmeric inside of a tea. Both have been well-documented anti-inflammatory effects. And then also just prioritizing tons of colorful veggies. Each different color that you can get in your diet represents a different antioxidant or phytonutrient in that food, because that is like from a vibrational state, like what's reflecting back to you through the color of the food. So things like berries are very rich in antioxidant because they have that deep, rich, dark bluish purple color. And these antioxidants directly modulate your inflammatory pathways inside of your body, as well as other foods that are rich in polyphenols too. So that is inflammation. And then connecting back gut and inflammation all together is one of the most important metabolic organs in your body, which is your liver. So I couldn't have this conversation without talking about your liver, also because this is something I'm actively working on in my own health journey right now, is how to really support my liver as a core like metabolic organ inside of my body. And this is the one that really surprises most people. It surprises me, as I was diving into my own healing journey here. Most people think of your liver as like a detox organ, not as a metabolic one, but your liver is, again, one of the most metabolically active organs in your entire body because it is responsible for metabolizing fat and converting fat into usable energy. It also, like we talked about earlier, it regulates your blood sugar by storing and releasing glucose as needed. It synthesizes protein that transports hormones through your bloodstream. We talked about that with your thyroid a little bit. It's the primary site for hormone clearance, meaning it takes used hormones inside of your body, it processes them, packages them up for excretion or for detoxification. We talked about that a little bit with estrogen detoxification. And so when your liver is overburdened from processed food, from alcohol, from synthetic hormones, from environmental toxins, all of these processes will not happen efficiently. Fat metabolism slows down, hormones that should be cleared start recirculating, leading to estrogen dominance, leading to all kinds of hormone imbalances that just wreak havoc on your cycle, your mood, your body composition. Blood sugar regulation becomes impaired. Your thyroid function becomes sluggish because liver plays a very key role in converting T4 into T3. Even if your thyroid is perfect itself, that conversion isn't happening. And so supporting your liver needs to be of top priority. And we can't talk about pro-metabolic eating without talking about how to support your liver. So eating cruciferous vegetables, broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, cabbage, arugula, very regularly, they can contain a compound that directly activates your liver's detoxification pathways. Also, things like beets can be really helpful for your liver and your bile production. Starting your morning with warm lemon water to gently stimulate that bile flow before you've eaten can be really helpful as well. Bitter greens like dandelion and arugula. I try to eat arugula every single day, and sometimes I'll add dandelion tea to that tea to help with bile production and support my liver and my gallbladder. And eggs. We've talked about eggs multiple times in this section alone. They are one of the richest sources of choline, which is essential for fat transport out of the liver. And really, it's just one of the most underrated nutrients in women's health altogether. So when I talk about food quality in a pro-metabolic context like this is what I mean. It's not a clean eating checklist. It is a list, not a list of things that you cannot have or that you have to eliminate or you have to cut out. It is a strategic additive approach that gives your adrenals, your thyroid, your gut, your liver, your inflammation pathways. It gives all of these important systems in your body the raw materials that they need to function optimally so that your metabolism can actually do its job efficiently. When these systems are supported, everything else downstream improves. Your energy, it improves, it stabilizes, your hormones come back into balance, your inflammation drops, your body shifts out of survival mode and into a state where fat loss, where muscle building, where real body recomposition becomes physiologically possible again. And that is the power of food quality done right, not through the lens of diet culture restriction. And now the last pillar here that I want to dive into is macronutrients. So we can't talk about micronutrients without talking about macronutrients a little bit. And I really just want to use this section to kind of myth bust some of the diet culture rules or fads around things like carbs and fats. Because the story that you've been told about carbs and fats is not only wrong, but it's actively working against your metabolic health. We have been taught to fear these things, and that protein is the only macro that really matters, that the goal is to eat as much protein as possible while keeping everything else as low as possible. And I followed that playbook for years. A lot of my clients come to me following that playbook, and almost universally, it makes you more inflamed, more hormonally dysregulated, and more metabolically damaged, not less. So let's talk about why your body needs all of these. We are going to start with protein because this is one of the macros that, as my audience and a lot of my clients, you're already prioritizing this, and I love that. But I want to make sure that you understand why it matters beyond just, hitting numbers. Protein is the structural material for your body. Every cell, enzyme, hormone, neurotransmitter is built from the amino acids of protein. From a metabolic standpoint, its most important job is to build and preserve muscle tissue for your body, because the more muscle you have, the better that your metabolic health is going to be, higher your metabolic rate is going to be. It's one of your biggest drivers to resting metabolic rate. It's one of your primary sites of glucose disposal, meaning the more muscle you have, the more efficient that your body manages your blood sugar, the more insulin sensitive you become. Protein also has the highest thermic effect of food, of any macronutrient, meaning that your body burns more calories just digesting and processing protein compared to carbs and fats. It is the most satiating macro, which means it keeps you fuller for longer. It reduces food noise throughout the day. And it's critical for recovery from workouts, from stress, from illness. Your body cannot repair tissues or produce immune cells or rebuild of any kind from any kind of physical demand on your body without adequate dietary protein intake. But here's the piece that I want you to hear, okay? Protein cannot do its job in isolation. If you are eating high protein but chronically under-eating overall, not enough calories or not enough carbs and fats, your body is going to take that dietary protein that you're eating and turn it into glucose for energy. Instead of using it for building muscle and repairing tissue, it's going to turn protein, amino acids, into glucose. So high protein intake only works the way that you want it to when it exists within the context of adequate total nutrition, which brings me to carbohydrates. I cannot tell you how many women come to me terrified of carbs. They've been low carb for years. They feel exhausted. Cycle is irregular or missing. Thyroid numbers are off. Mood is unstable. And they are still convinced that if they just had, if they add more carbs back in, that they're going to gain weight and lose all of their progress. And I want to dismantle that fear completely because it's keeping you stuck. Carbs are your body's preferred energy source, not fat, not protein, carbs, glucose specifically, which is what carbohydrates break down into. It is what your brain runs on. It is what your red blood cells need and require. It's what your thyroid depends on to function properly. Your thyroid needs adequate glucose availability to convert T4 into T3. When carbohydrate intake is low, T3 levels drop, your metabolic rate slows down, your body shifts into that conservation mode, you feel cold, tired, foggy, your metabolism becomes increasingly resistant to fat loss, not because you're eating too much, but because you're not eating enough, and not eating enough of the right things specifically. Carbs directly influence your cortisol rhythm. When blood sugar drops from inadequate carb intake, cortisol then rises to compensate for that, like we already talked about. And that chronic cortisol elevation does a number to your hormones, to your body composition, to your overall health. And when your cycle is irregular, your menstrual cycle is a direct reflection of your metabolic status. And when your body doesn't have enough energy availability, and carbs being that primary signal of energy availability to your brain and your body, it will downregulate your reproductive function. So hormones like your LSH, your FSH, the production of those start to drop. Ovulation becomes irregular or stops altogether. And that's what happened to me. I mean, I lost my period, and I've worked with dozens of clients who've also lost theirs. And in almost every case, inadequate carb intake is a significant contributing factor to that. So bringing carbs back in was the main part of what brought my cycle back and what does for a lot of my clients as well. Carbs are also your primary source of fiber. We talked about food quality in the last section. Fiber feeds your gut, supports your detoxification pathways, regulates blood sugar, keeps your digestion moving. They are one of the richest forms of micronutrients, from B vitamins to potassium to magnesium. So when you cut carbs, you are not just cutting calories, you're cutting an entire category of nutritional support that your metabolism, your hormones, and your gut really depend on to function optimally. So food quality matters, like the types of carbs that you're eating matter, but whole food carb sources like fruit, Veggies, root veggies, starches, whole grains, legumes, rice, they are not the enemy. They are medicine for your body. Your body is asking for them. And it's also asking for fats. Fat has also been demonized even longer than carbohydrates, actually. And the damage that has done to women's hormone health is genuinely scary. It's genuinely scary to me. The truth about dietary fats that really changes everything is that your sex hormones are made from cholesterol, specifically estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, DHEA. It is all synthesized from dietary fat and cholesterol. So when you are chronically under eating fat, you are literally removing the raw material that your body needs to produce hormones that regulate your cycle, your mood, your libido, your metabolism, your body composition. You cannot have healthy hormones on a chronically low fat diet. It is like physiologically impossible. Fats are super important for cell membrane integrity. Every cell in your body is surrounded by a lipid bilayer, a membrane of fat, pretty much. And the quality of the fat that you eat directly determines the quality of your cell membranes, which determines how efficiently nutrients can get into your cells and how well your hormone receptors can function on those cells. So poor quality fats, things like processed seed oils or trans fats, they're going to create stiff, poorly functioning cell membranes, which is going to impair nutrient absorption and like hormone function on a cellular level. Fat is also required for absorption of fat-soluble vitamins A, D, E, and K. So these are not optimal nutrients. You need all of these nutrients and you need fat to be able to absorb them, to carry them into your cells. And fats are primarily very important for your brain health. Your brain is approximately 60% fat. It runs on omega-3 fatty acids specifically. So chronically low omega-3 intake is associated with things like depression, anxiety, brain fog, poor stress resilience. All things I hear from clients consistently that almost always improve when fat intake is optimized. So just like carbs, your fat sources are going to matter here. In a pro-metabolic diet, we're going to focus on things like extra virgin olive oil for its anti-inflammatory properties, things like avocado oil for monounsaturated fats to support heart health and hormone function. We're going to focus on things like wild fatty fish like salmon, sardines, nuts, seeds, all really important for fat-soluble vitamins, and then whole food saturated fats from things like eggs, grass-fed butter, grass-fed beef, coconut oil, which are going to help support hormone synthesis and your cell membrane integrity. What I want you to minimize, not because fat is bad, but because, these specific sources can drive inflammation inside of the body, are things like processed fats, things like seed oils, like canola oil, soybean oil, corn oil, or vegetable oil. All are highly processed and oxidize easily, and they're going to drive systemic inflammation inside the body that we talked about in that gut and liver section. So your body needs all three macronutrients, okay? Get that through your brain. Not just protein, not protein and fat, all three in adequate amounts from quality sources distributed throughout the entire day. When you eat enough protein to build muscle and preserve muscle, you eat enough carbs to fuel your thyroid and keep your cortisol stable, and enough fat to produce your hormones and absorb fat-soluble vitamins, your metabolism then has everything it needs to function in the way that it was designed to. That is when body recomposition happens. When energy stabilizes, cravings disappear, cycles regulate, your body starts working with you instead of against you. And that is what eating for your metabolism actually looks like. And it's a lot more food than most of you have been eating. Okay, so those are the 4 nutritional pillars. I want to spend just a few minutes here on what I call metabolic accelerators. These are the lifestyle inputs that will amplify everything that you're doing nutritionally. Things like, number 1, weight training. Resistance training is the most powerful tool that you have for improving metabolic rate long term. It builds your muscle, it improves your insulin sensitivity, it supports bone density, it triggers hormonal adaptations that make your body more efficient at burning fat. If you are not lifting weights, you need to start now. Nothing replaces it. Number 2 is going to be sleep. Poor sleep, even just a few nights, measurably impairs insulin sensitivity, elevates cortisol, increases ghrelin, your hunger hormone, and depletes leptin, your fullness hormone. You cannot out-eat or out-train bad sleep. It is a non-negotiable for metabolic output. Number 3 is going to be hydration. Your liver needs water to metabolize fat. Your kidneys need water to filter toxins. Your cells need water for every enzymatic action involved in metabolism. Chronic low-grade dehydration is one of the most underrated reasons that people feel sluggish and stall in your health goals. And then number 4, I couldn't go a whole episode without talking about this. It is nervous system regulation. This one ties everything together. Chronically activated stress response, high cortisol, sympathetic dominance, will suppress your digestion, impair your nutrient absorption, tank your thyroid function, and make fat loss feel almost physiologically impossible regardless of how well you're eating. Managing your nervous system is not negotiable. It is truthfully like one of the biggest metabolic interventions that you can start to practice. Okay? So let's bring this all together before we part ways. I want you to leave this episode with one really clear takeaway: that your metabolism is not broken. It's not working against you. It is responding intelligently and predictably to the inputs that you are giving it. And if you've been exhausted, hormonally dysregulated, stuck in your body composition, constantly thinking about food, pushing through energy crashes on caffeine and willpower, that is not a personal failing. That is a systems problem. A systems problem has a systems solution. And what we talked about today is that solution. Eating enough to support your energy availability so that your thyroid and your adrenals are not in a constant state of alarm. Timing your meals in a way that keeps your blood sugar stable so cortisol never has to step in as a backup fuel source. Choosing foods that give your gut, your liver, your inflammatory pathways what they need to function. Not just taking things away, but adding things in. And eating all 3 macronutrients, protein, carbs, and fats in adequate amounts because your hormones, your muscle tissue, your brain, and your metabolism depend on every single one of them. This is what pro-metabolic approach to nutrition actually looks like. Not another cut, not another protocol that's asking more of your body when it's already running on empty. A real, sustainable, biologically backed way of eating that works with your body instead of against it. And I want to be honest with you, okay? This is not always a simple switch to make, especially if you spent years in diet culture, years under eating, years being told that less is always more. Unlearning that takes time. It takes support. It takes someone who can look at your full picture, at your lifestyle, at your labs, at your history, at your current diet, at your hormonal status, and help you build a plan that is specific to you. And that's exactly what I do inside of my one-on-one coaching program, the Metabolism Reset Method. If you've been listening to this episode, nodding your head, if you recognize yourself somewhere in anything that we talked about today, I want you to apply to work with me. The link is in the show notes down below. We will get on a discovery call. We'll talk about where you're at. We'll figure out what working together will look like for you and if it's the right next step for you. And we'll go from there. Okay. Thank you so much for being here. If this episode is helpful, please share it with a friend who needs to hear it, because I genuinely believe that this information changes lives when it gets to the right person who needs to hear it. Leave a review if you have not yet. It means the world, and it helps the show reach more women who need it. All right. I'll see you guys next Tuesday. Bye, guys.